Hello and welcome to the Jackass, the Swansea City podcast. I am Guto and with me, as always, is Steve Carroll. How are you, Steve?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Not too bad. Have you got over the Wales away trip yet?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, it's Wednesday today. I'm quite pleased I was off work, as you can imagine, because I didn't get back from Estonia until about 10:30 last night, and it was about 14 hours travel, all in told. But great trips, great to be back following Wales again. But yeah, definitely needed today off. I think I wouldn't have looked great getting into work at 6:30 this morning, I don't think.
No, two away trips in a week is taxing on the liver. That's for certain. Just to let you know, Matt is going to be joining us later on in the podcast, but we're going to start with him, and we are going to begin with the Wales chat. We'll move on then to discuss the Swansea games from before the international break. So if you want to just skip the Wales chat, you can skip through a couple of minutes to reach those games. After that, we'll discuss the fans forum, which is taking place tonight as we are recording, and then of course we'll finish off with what you all tuned in to hear, our preview of the big South Wales derby on Sunday, Swansea against Cardiff, 12 o'clock at the Liberty Stadium. We cannot wait, but you will have to wait for the chat on that match. We'll start off, Steve, with the Wales chat. You were out in Prague, you were out in Tallinn. I mean, extremely jealous. The first chance fans have had to actually travel abroad to watch Wales since before the pandemic. Before we get on to discuss the football, how were they as trips, and how did fans make up for lost time?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of excitement, as you can imagine, really, to be back on the road with Wales. I mean, the people that go to Wales away, I think it used to be one of the best kept secrets, really. I mean, everyone loves it. You just get to go abroad and, drink significant amounts over a period of a few days, and got a bit of football in there as well. And then for the other people, there's a bit of culture. You can do other things, like I combined drinking with a thing where I went to the ice bar, for example, and that was nice. Went up to the castle in Prague on the day of the game, just to give a bit of respite from drinking. So yeah, they were nice. I mean, Estonia was a bit quieter, really. Not much going on, and there was a couple of museums that you could go to on the Monday, but you could have normally gone to on the Monday, I should say, but everything seemed to be shut on a Monday in Estonia, so I can't really say I saw a lot there. But stopped off in Finland as well Saturday night. If you're going to go drinking there, I'd be prepared. It's going to be a bit of a sting on the wallet, but no, they were good trips, all places I haven't been to before as well, which is a bonus. So yeah, pretty good, I would say.
My brother stopped off in Riga on his way to Tallinn, and that city was full of Dutch fans because they've been out there to watch their team play against Latvia. So he had a very, very good night en route from Prague to Tallinn. Let's move on to the football, because there was a bit of pressure on these games after what was a disappointing night against Estonia in the last international round of games. We got to Prague. I think it's fair to say the home side were the heavy favourites, but I'll be honest, I'm struggling to remember a qualifier Wales have played in which I was more entertained than I was in this match, Steve. I'll be honest, I was not expecting that performance, regardless of the result. I mean, the way the match was played was just phenomenal for any neutrals watching.
It was a cracking game, wasn't it? I was thinking that at the time, actually, just like, I sort of can't take my eyes off this. It's going sort of one end to the other, and obviously, especially towards the end, I felt we were really pushing, for that late winner type of thing, really. But yeah, it was, do get a lot of games sometimes in international football, don't you, that can maybe be a little bit dull, but this one wasn't. I think, in some ways, we needed a win probably to make up for Estonia, and we certainly had that attitude, with some of the subs that we made and that type of thing. And if anything, I felt we were more attacking than the Czechs, really, which I thought was a bit surprising, because I know they've obviously got the situation, sort of in their hands, providing Wales don't beat Belgium in the last qualifier, you would have thought. But at the same time, I mean, they really had a chance to nail second place to the mast, really. So it was a bit of a surprise in that sense. But yeah, it was, there were a lot of chances in that game, weren't there? It did to and fro. It wasn't as cautious as what some games can be, really. And it was, I think, if it had carried on for another few minutes, nobody would have complained, really, because it was one of the most entertaining games I've been to with Wales, certainly away from home, I'd say.
Oh, it was fantastic to watch, and I thought we were better than the Czechs, I'll be honest. And it was a shock, and I think it was a shock to the Czechs. I don't think they were expecting us to approach the game the way we did, especially considering Gareth Bale wasn't on the pitch, but Aaron Ramsey really, really showed up. I mean, he misses a lot of games for Wales, which is seriously frustrating. But when he's there, my God, does he make a difference? And we saw that for, well, the first goal in particular. A great counter-attacking move and finished off very, very nicely by Ramsey. And then the second one, a beautiful finish by Dan James after a great through ball from Harry Wilson. Wales still aren't scoring many goals. But actually, the goals we are scoring, we'll get on to Estonia in a bit, which is the anomaly in this. But the goals that we have been scoring in qualifying have, by and large, been really, really pretty goals.
Yeah, they have. I mean, I was impressed with how we played. I've got to say, I've been quite critical recently. And I think you've been quite similar, really, in terms of, a lot of our performances have been dull. We haven't been creating enough chances. Certainly haven't been finishing many. But we've managed to nick games, really. I think that's been our sort of forte, but we did play much better then. As you say, the goals were very good. I mean, it's quite nice to see a score on the break. I think we've seen it with the Swans a few times where there's an opportunity to break on occasions, and we then slow it down and then wait for everyone's back, and then the chance have gone. But we really did well with that. We're quick passing, and then obviously Ramsey has taken the gamble with the crossfield ball, and it's paid off. The goalkeeper's obviously slipped, which was a bit of a help, but yeah, that was. To see us score a goal like that was encouraging rather than, wasting a bit of time. We really went for the juggler there and scored. And I've got to say, it was absolutely wild when that went in. It was bonkers. There were pints flying everywhere. Not sure that bit was so good. But, it was one of the more crazy Wales away celebrations, really. And as you say, I really felt after we made the subs of Harry Wilson and Connor Roberts, after we conceded the 2 goals, that we were massively on top. And they were subs that really worked for us. And as you say, Wilson did play a really lovely through ball to Dan James, and it was a great finish as well. Sort of just lifts it over the keeper a bit and right into the side net, and he couldn't have hit it any better, really. And if we're honest with Dan, sometimes that final ball can let him down, but he got that spot on. And I think at that point I was feeling quite encouraged that we could go on and win. That we had more chances after it as well, didn't we? That we were maybe a bit unlucky not to put away, and maybe 1 or 2 others we should have done better with.
I mean, in an attacking sense, we were absolutely fantastic and created chance after chance. And like you said, the substitutions added to that. We really went for it. The only thing that undid it for us, really, was these mistakes at the back again, which are becoming a real habit, unfortunately. I mean, the first goal conceded straight after we scored the first. I mean, I can't imagine how deflating that must have been in the away end. And then the first goal, I've got to say, the defence was all over the place. 3 centre-backs going for the same player. I mean, basic stuff. But the second Czech goal really, really was a howler of incredible proportions. I mean, you very rarely see it, Steve. Ball pass back to the keeper, and I'm not sure what Ward is trying to do here. Sometimes you see there's an uncomfortable bobble which catches the keeper out or something. I just think he just takes his eye off the ball entirely here.
It's a funny one, and I do think Ramsey does put the ball back to him a little bit too quickly. There's a bit too much pace on it. I will say that, and it is bobbling slightly. But look, it's a bad mistake. There's no other way of describing it, really, is there? I mean, I do feel a bit sorry for him as well, because he slid back to stop it. It's hit the post and then hit him and got in. So we could have got away with it, I suppose. But it's a shambolic goal to concede, isn't it? I mean, from where I was, just remember, I put my hands over my mouth, and I think I was speechless for a good minute, which is quite rare for me. And I think a lot of other people were doing the same thing, really, because you just could not believe what had happened. It's such a freak goal that you just don't see very often, isn't it? But I mean, as you say, defensively, where we are letting ourselves down, I think that's definitely a weakness of our game. It was so strong, wasn't it, years ago under Chris Coleman? He did so well to make sure that we were cutting out most of our mistakes. But yeah, it is a bit concerning defensively. I mean, we don't look. The funny thing is, we've kept quite a lot of clean sheets over the last couple of years, But I just think we sort of got away with it a little bit, and at times maybe, when we then have played the better nations, we have conceded and looked a bit of a shambles. I mean, you could say that about the Czech game. Conceded 3 to Belgium. That wasn't great. It is Belgium, and going forward, they're very good. I will say that. But I think one of the ones that really concerned me was about a year ago when we played England in a friendly, and they basically played a reserve team. I know we made changes, but our back four and keeper were our strongest, or I would say was the strongest, and we were all over the place. So I just think when we come up against someone half decent, we are given a bit of the runaround defensively, and it is a concern. We've got away with it in other games. We'll come on to discuss Estonia, where was one where we got away with it, but we've got to sort of sort it out, I think. And I think another thing we sort of need to do probably is decide what our strongest formation and strongest team is, especially defensively, because I know it's difficult at times. Like you look at Roden, obviously couldn't play in the last international break. He is obviously in that team. He's our best centre half. And if he doesn't play, then maybe that doesn't help either. But, I think we have got to look at what we think is our best, because, is Chris Mepp a minute, for example? I've got my doubts.
He should. I mean, Page, what gets me with Page is, I'm definitely not one of these people who thinks Page is, way out of his depth and needs to go, etc. I'm quite open to keeping Page. On the basis that he's with us at the moment. But the one thing with Page that really gets on my nerves is this defensive weakness, which you assume would be a real strength of his, because he was just a very unflashy but very reliable and solid centre-back during his playing days. And you see none of those attributes really in the current back line. I mean, you've got Roden there, who is quite easily our best defender, but he's playing alongside Chris Mepham, who is decent enough with the ball at his feet, but I've never been convinced by him defensively. And he's not, starting regularly for Bournemouth at the moment. I think he's lost quite a bit of confidence from the club there. And then playing on the other side of him, you have Ethan Ampadu, who I love, but who I think's greatest potential is undoubtedly in midfield. And as a defender, I don't think he's that great. I think he's fine. He'll do you a job there. But I don't think he's a brilliant centre-back by any means. And I just feel that when you include those two alongside Rodon, you're picking players there on the basis of their footballing ability rather than their defensive abilities. And we aren't good enough to be able to do that. Sorry, we've been caught out so many times, and we're just not learning a lesson. We're not developing. We're not getting better. And at some point, that tough decision has to be made to bring in better defenders, more reliable defenders, even if they're not as comfortable with the ball at their feet. We've got to shore up that defense, because even Rodon at the moment, because he's not got any support alongside him, he's being stretched, he's being overworked at the back there, and he's not looking as convincing as you'd want him to. I just think it's a real issue. And let's move on to talk about Estonia, because we won 1-0, but it was in no way convincing. I don't think it was even deserved, and our defence really got away with one there, because throughout the night there was just mistake after mistake, misunderstanding after misunderstanding, and they just don't seem to have any kind of confidence or any kind of understanding in what their teammates are going to be doing. And that at the end comes down to Page, both in terms of team selection and how they're being coached in the admittedly little time that they do have together.
Yeah, I've got my doubts about Page. I've got to be honest with you. I think he's been thrust into a tough position. Regardless of that, we can't get rid of him really anyway, because of all the situation with Giggs. I mean, you can't really appoint an interim manager, I don't think, in this situation that's outside the setup already. So I do think we have to persist with it for now. If I'm honest, I'm sure we'll discuss this further at a later date once there's been a resolution. For me, I'd like to see somebody else take the playoffs. But, we were all over the place in Estonia. I can't look at it in another way. We didn't create a lot either. And I can't really think of many valid excuses. We've done a bit of travelling, but at times that can be the same for everybody. And we had a more than good enough side out there to win. We didn't have Bale, obviously, but most of our other guys were there. We were missing one or two. Obviously, we were missing David Brooks, who I'm sure we'd both like to send our regards to after the terrible news today, and hope he makes a speedy recovery. But we should have been better than what we were. That was a return, wasn't it, to the likes of Belarus away, from my point of view, where we got away with it, and we got away with it again. And I think the frustrating thing from my point of view is we all felt so good after the Czech game. I was thinking, well, if we play like that, whoever we get in the playoffs, as long as none of the major nations like Spain slip into it, we're more than capable of giving them a game and we'll have a chance. But I watched the Estonia one and I thought, how the hell does this team win a playoff? And I don't have an answer for it. And that is the worrying thing, really. We've got big games that are going to come next March, regardless of whether we're home or away. We're more or less guaranteed that playoff place. And, and right now, am I convinced we can get through? The answer has to be no. So that's what worries me, really, because we should look so much better, shouldn't we? And what we see defensively, as you've said, I mean, how the hell is a better nation not just going to pick us off?
I'm very concerned about what Belgium will do to us. I mean, we saw the Belarus could score 2 goals against us away in Russia a couple of weeks back. We've got to play them at the Cardiff City Stadium. The way we play against these so-called lesser sides, you can't say that, we'll definitely get 3 points there. There's no guarantee at all that Belgium game is going to be the kind of showpiece event that we want it to be. And when you look at the attacking talent that Belgium have, okay, they're not the same side they were a couple of years back. I don't think they're the kind of world-beating force that they were before. They've got fewer world-class players. They've got some really aging stars there now that they're still relying on in certain positions. But man, that what somebody like De Bruyne, Lukaku, Carrasco can do to our defence, I dread to think, because if Estonia can pick us apart, and the only thing that got us that win in Tallinn was Estonia's lack of quality up front, because they had the chances. Most of them came from our mistakes. We just, if we play anything like that against Belgium, not only is it not going to be a contest, it's going to be an embarrassment. Make no mistake about it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, obviously, the situation right now is in terms of goal difference. That the Czechs are likely to beat Estonia and we're likely to beat Belarus, you would have thought. But that means we'd still need something off Belgium. And how do we get it? Because, as you've said, I mean, De Bruyne makes a lot of very good players look ordinary. So what he's going to do to us is quite concerning. Lukaku doesn't need many chances to score. And against our defence, he will probably get a couple of good ones, to say the least. So I don't really see us getting anything in that game. The hope is that Belgium have already qualified, which is perfectly possible. And, of course, then they may well rest players, and that could play into our hands a little bit. But we're relying on that, really. I would say I can't see us getting anything. And if we don't get anything, I think we're more or less nailed on for an away playoff. And, I mean, you could argue in some ways that maybe playing away to a reasonable team might not be a weakness based on the Czech Republic game. It may help us, but if we then have 2 away games in a short period, to get to that World Cup, that would be very tough as well, wouldn't it? So, it's hard to see us beating Belgium, isn't it? I know we've done it before. It's been brilliant, but that was a very different Belgium. I would say. I think the team that obviously we did beat at the Euros was a better team than this, as you've said, but they've now got a far better manager in charge, and you just don't see them losing to someone like us now. I think the nations that will beat Belgium will be the better ones. Like, obviously, they lost to France, didn't they, the other day in the Nations League. They lost to Italy in the summer in the Euros. I mean, those type of teams can beat them, but I just don't see anyone outside of that major group managing to do a number on Belgium now. No,
I'm struggling to see that. And, let's face it, it was a mixed international break. There were very obvious positives from the Czech Republic performance. But like we said, there are these kind of recurring issues now that aren't getting resolved with Wales, and they are causing us a lot of problems now. And it's just something that has to be addressed. There's no two ways about it. And I'd like to see us actually learn from our mistakes and address those issues. That's a concerning thing for me, that we're not really seemingly addressing those issues. And it is a concern. But there we go. We'll the important thing, I guess, is that Wales do still have a chance of finishing second in the group, albeit they have a heck of a task on their hands in the final 2 games against Belarus and Belgium if they are to do it. But hey, we've seen Wales do some pretty incredible things over the last few years. Who knows? Maybe they can pull one out of the bag this time around. Okay, we're going to move on now to discuss the Swans' last 2 games, which are against Fulham and Derby. So let's get back to actually discussing the Swans. And good news, we've been joined by Matt. How are you, Matt?
Good news. I'm sure that's a subjective term, but yeah, no, I'm good, thanks.
Yeah, fair enough. Before we get on to discuss the really pressing issues, mainly, of course, the derby coming up on Sunday, we've got 2 matches from before the international break to look back at. An away defeat against Fulham and a 0-0 draw away against Derby. Well, let's start off with Fulham because this was a pretty comprehensive defeat, Matt. But dare I say it, there were some positives to be found there as well.
Yeah, there were. If I'm honest, I mean the comprehension of the defeat came from one man really, and I do feel like, and this is probably up for debate, but I feel like Russell Martin lined up his back 4 wrong, or back 5 if you like, wrong on the evening, because you had Norton marking Mitrovic and Cabanco out to the side, and I feel like the swapping them to around might have given us a little bit more of a chance against the big man up front, because I think he was he was in imperious form, wasn't he? And he, his first goal was offside and he's scuffed one of them, but that's, good strikers stick the ball in the back of the net and then leave the officials to do or not do their job, as it were. But he was in great form and we had no answer to him. But like you say, it wasn't without positivity, because aside from that, and I think we did quite well. I think we showed good glimpses. We had far more of the ball than Fulham, and we created a few chances. We scored a great goal on the break. So there were signs there, and I know Russell Martin came out after the game and he was quite he was very complimentary of the way we played. There is probably a second way of looking at that, saying that we go back to 2-1 and we're thinking, right, okay, there's a game on now, and then straight away Fulham scored the third, which is a bit of a sucker punch. But because we were hoping at half time, maybe at 2-1, the second half plays out slightly differently. But Fulham probably then were happy to let us have the ball because they knew the game, they had that cushion of a 2-goal lead. But let's take nothing away from us. I think, we're learning, we're trying to get up to Russell Martin's style of play. And you could see, as you say, in large periods of that game what he was trying to achieve and the way he wants us to play.
Steve, what about you? Are you glass half full or glass half empty in terms of this performance? Because there were some very nice passages of play, but it has to be said, apart from the goal and 1 or 2 half chances at the start of the second half, we didn't create too many chances. And Fulham, they had the 2-goal lead and they sat back, and for the most part in the second half, they did look very comfortable, just letting us have the ball. Was it a good performance, or was it overshadowed really by naivety at the same time?
There was definitely naivety. I mean, I should probably bring in what was said at the fans forum tonight, actually, about Russell Martin in terms of style of play, because he did mention this game actually, and he said that we had the option if we could sit off and try and stop them playing, or we could go toe to toe with them the way that we want to play, and obviously we chose the latter. It was, and I think in terms of certainly the short term, it was probably going to cost us, but I think he's thinking more long term, really, isn't he? In terms of this is how we want to play, so we'll have we will have more of a go at them because it'll stand us in good stead maybe for the future. So, we were a bit naive, I think, but at the same time, there were patches where we played all right. I mean, Patterson scored a lovely goal for us, and we had a big chance early in the second half with Flynn Downs to get a goal back, and if that goes in, maybe we would have had a chance. But it's going to be difficult, isn't it? Fulham have got a lot of players that would walk into most other teams in the division. It's first 11, haven't they? You can't look at it in any other way. Mitrovic has obviously been a pain in the arse from our point of view. Obviously down the years, first goal was offside. Don't forget that either. It was always going to be difficult. That's the way that I'm looking at it. I wasn't too disappointed. I didn't think we played too badly, considering who we were playing. So I think there's positives from that, really. And that is our only defeat in the last 6 games. So don't forget that. And I think a lot of sides are going to go there and lose. I mean, it would be a big surprise, I would say, if Fulham didn't finish in the top 6, wouldn't it?
I just added a tail on to what Steve was saying there, and it goes back to what he was saying about Russell Martin wanting to play the way now, why he wants us to be playing in a year, 18 months' time. And I think that goes back to my point, what I was saying about Norton and Cabango switching, because Cabango had a torrid time as well, trying to keep their winger quiet. I forget his name, but he taught Cabango a new one time and time again.
It was Neeson's Cabano, wasn't it? That was a mismatch.
Yeah, and he thought, well, if you put Cabango against Mitrovic and Norton against Cabano, you've got a better chance there in both duels. But I thought those two could have switched round. But in essence, what I'm saying here is he could have done that to nullify the Fulham threat of the evening. But if long term he wants an extremely competent ball player as the centre man of his 3 at the back, then he's going to be playing that now, whether or not it costs us in the short term. As Steve was saying, I don't think Russell Martin is looking short term. I think he's looking, right, I'm going to be playing with a ball playing centre back there, so whoever we've got to play there will play there.
But Steve, this is kind of like what we were discussing with Wales, isn't it? That Robert Page has gone for defenders based on their footballing ability more than their defensive ability, by the looks of things. And last 2 games, okay, there have been injuries which have forced his hand as well. But he had other options other than playing Norton through as the main centre back, and Ryan Manning, say, as left on the left side, that back 3, Cabango in the slightly wider position there. He did have other options, but those are the options that he picked. Are we still looking for the right balance? We'll come on to discuss the tactics for the Cardiff game later on, but going forward, is this the way that it's going to be, or do you think we are going to see the likes of Rhys Williams and Ryan Bennett in particular, even possibly Latibaudiere, challenging for positions in that back 3?
I mean, you would have thought so, wouldn't you? I mean, Bennett, for example, probably is definitely going to play. I don't think we would have brought in Rhys Williams if we weren't intending to play him. I mean, obviously he has started a couple of games for us. So, yeah, I think it wasn't ideal, was it, really, what happened with the Fulham game, in terms of Cabango was the only established centre-half that played, really, wasn't he? And then Manning and Norton either side of him. I think, ideally, I think the manager would like Bennett with Cabango, with possibly Williams, I would say. So, yeah, he hasn't really picked. I'm not sure if he's picked those 3 together yet. He may have done in 1 or 2 games, but I think ideally that's what he would like, and then probably Manning as the left wing back. So, yeah, I mean, your hands are tied sometimes, aren't they? I mean, we've had 1 or 2 knocks. We've had previous COVID outbreaks, so it's been tough for the manager in some ways to pick the side that he wanted to. But I mean, we did get shown up against Fulham. We can't look at it another way. But like I said, they're a good side, aren't they? So, I think he's taken this long-term approach. He wants us to play in a certain way, and we're just going to have to take the teething problems that come with it, aren't we?
Yeah. I think that's the key message. And after Fulham, of course, we went from playing one of the strongest squads in the division to certainly one of the thinnest squads in the division. Derby County, crisis hit Derby County. We say crisis hit, of course, they are bottom of the table, but they would have started this game quite a few points ahead of Swansea had they not had that points deduction due to their financial troubles. So we knew that they were going to be a tough nut to crack. And Matt, that's how it turned out in the end. A frustrating afternoon at Pride Park.
Yeah, the double header would have looked a lot sweeter if we'd got what we should have got out of those 2 games, which would probably been a return of 3 points. But as it is, we got the 1 point off the 2 games, and it does leave a little bit more of a bitter taste in the mouth because, make no mistake about it, Derby was 2 points dropped. I think we could have been a little bit more assertive with them. I think there were large periods of that second half where Derby didn't intend on stepping a yard outside of the 18-yard box, and fair enough. I mean, I think for them, they were looking at it as it was a point gained. We were better. I think they knew from the start that we were better than them, and they did what they had to do to keep Sir Joel Pirro quiet and stuff. So he didn't have a very active game, if you like. But for what we tried to do, I think Russell Martin recognised as well, because he made attacking substitutions in the game. He wanted to go for it, and unfortunately, the Liam Cullen one is. He's obviously horribly out of form, and one of the other ones was Ethan Laird coming on, and he looked every bit as lacking in match sharpness or fitness or whatever it may be with him, as you would be concerned about, really, because he didn't have the impact you hoped for either. But no, over the course of the game, there was plenty of opportunity for us to really, just try and choke them out a bit and try and force the issue a little bit more. And in the end, you may look at that Tom Lawrence triple header of attempts at Ben Hamer and think, well, maybe we were lucky to come away with a point, because he had a few sniffs of goal without our defenders ever threatening to get a tackle in, which was quite shambolic at the time, really. But 2 points dropped for me.
Yeah, that would have been a really painful one had Derby from the back of the net there. And in truth, Steve, Derby didn't really have too many opportunities, but when the opportunities did come, they could have snatched it. There's no doubt about that. And again, I think it comes back to this naivety. It was also interesting there what Matt said. I didn't feel that we really pushed for the win in the second half. I thought we were quite clearly the better team in the first half. Second half, it got a bit ragged. We did kind of lose our way a little bit. I didn't feel that we were particularly effective. And I didn't feel Russell Martin's substitutions for once I just found them a little bit confusing, if I'm being honest. I thought the decision to bring, obviously, I thought Laird should have come on for Lattimore. Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that one. But when he did come on, it was quite clear why he'd been left on the bench in the first place. He didn't look entirely match fit and didn't look up to the game, really. But then, in a match that we were really struggling to break down the opposition, I didn't understand bringing on Cullen for Pirro. I would have understood playing 2 up front, side by side, and sacrificing one of the midfield. We had Grimes, Downs, and Smith in midfield at that point. There were plenty of options there that you could have taken off. I didn't think Corey Smith was really working in that position, in the more advanced position. I didn't think he was getting any joy. And then the decision to bring on Morgan Whittaker right at the end, when really he had no time to influence the match. I just thought perhaps maybe a little bit of fatigue after a busy period showing with Russell Martin as well for once. I don't know, but I thought his in-game management was a bit surprising from my point of view.
Yeah, I think, taking Pirro off for Cullen, to me, that indicated that we weren't really desperate for the win, because Pirro has been by far our biggest goal threat. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think there were maybe 1 or 2 decisions in that game that weren't the best. The only thing I think of, obviously, hectic period, a lot of games, a lot of minutes. Maybe Pirro didn't need to come off. It's that's possible as well. So I get that, but I think you're right on the whole. The first half was good. We had chances. Second half, not so much. It wasn't a bad result, was it, overall? I don't think. But I think it's just the fact that we have had a nice little spell the last 6 games. We've only lost 1 of them, but there have been 4 draws in there. I think the aim is going to have to be to try and turn some of them into wins, isn't it? I think. But it was, on the whole, we were the better team. We played quite well, and obviously, as you say, Derby are bottom, but at the same time, they're not bottom in terms of pointers because they've had a deduction. So I thought there was some positive signs in there again, which we seem to be saying about most games really, which is a good thing. It's just that we need to put more teams to the sword, and there would be no better way than to start with that than on Sunday.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we go on to discuss the Cardiff game and everything else that we've got to discuss in this pod, Matt, on the face of it, you could say that Cardiff game looks like, a likely draw because neither of the teams have been winning much recently. And you're looking back at some of the draws the Swans have had: Hull 0-0, Millwall 0-0. Okay, the Luton draw was, a crazy one, and one we'll never forget. But then a 0-0 away against Derby, and a lot of the 3-0 0-0s in particular, they followed a certain trend, didn't they? The Swans having a lot of the ball and just failing to find that bit of quality that would have really broken them down and got the 3 points. We're just not producing, we're not able to find that key to unlock the deep sitting, really tightly packed defences at the moment. And looking ahead to Cardiff, that could be a bit of an issue for us, couldn't it?
Yeah, it could be, and we'll come back again to the deadline day option of Forsu from Brentford and how that might have materialised and how that might be different. Our season may already be looking a little bit different, but that's by the by. I think everyone knows from watching us that we're missing that creative 10, the one that's going to be feeding Pirro, because Pirro looks every bit the sharpshooter that we need. We need someone who's not afraid to hit the ball early. He's brimming with confidence. Even if he goes a couple of games without getting a goal, he wouldn't know it because he still hits them early. He still looks to catch the keeper off guard, and that for me is a dream. I love seeing strikers do that because you can overthink it up front, and he is not doing that. So you need someone to give him the ball and tell him to do what he does best, and do it more often, which is where we're looking to adapt really as the season progresses. I think a lot of money will be put on a draw on Sunday. There are elements to our game which Cardiff won't like. None more so than the fact that they're probably going to get less than 20% possession because they don't like possession at the best of times, Cardiff, and we love it. So I think both teams will be quite happy with that scenario. And in complete disarray, which terrifies me going into a derby. We're damned if we do and damned if we don't, because if we score early and we put a couple on Cardiff, it will almost certainly be curtains for Mick McCarthy, which Cardiff fans will actually turn around and say that's a good thing for them. But from our perspective, as I was just saying there, the difference between us turning those draws into wins is we have these periods of play where we really look like this could be the game, and we got to score in those times. We've got to score at the time when we're really pushing the team back, because we always seem to concede,
like we did against Huddersfield.
I mean, Huddersfield in the end, perhaps it was, whilst it was fairly comfortable, it was always that thing in the back of your head, we should have got a couple more. But Huddersfield was a perfect example of scoring early, one of your first chances, and having that control of the game and not having to force the issue. Because I feel like in the setup we have with Russell Martin, we will benefit so much from being 1-0 up in a game and teams having to come out, because we will already be having 55-60% of the ball. And if teams want to come out and press us, then I feel like when they're panicking and they're pressing high and they're desperate for an equaliser, I feel like that's, once we're in form and we're knowing what we're doing, that's the sort of gameplay that we will be looking for to pick teams off, because they won't be able to get the ball off us. But at the moment is getting that goal when we're in the first 20-25 minutes, when we're bossing the ball, bossing territory. Because if we don't do it in that period, as you saw against Derby, I think you have those periods then where you just think, God, Derby are hanging on. And then they don't score, and then you just feel like Derby are coming back into it a little bit, and you feel like maybe it's a bit of a morale hit then with the Swans as well, because they feel like we've had all of this game and somehow the scoreline still says 0-0, and we're not doing enough to punish teams when they're on the back foot. And we always seem to concede in those moments. We just need to find the missing link or the formula to make sure we score in them as well, because that to me would be a game changer for the whole season, is scoring in those right moments.
Yeah, obviously that is one of the toughest things in football, isn't it? But that inability to unlock a defence that when they're sitting deep and parking the bus, it's just prevented us from converting a couple of those draws into wins. And it would make our league position look very different if we had managed that. Just before we move on from the derby chat, unfortunately, we do have to discuss racism among our fans. Once again, we discussed this against Luton, a small minority up at Luton starting off some racist chants. They were told straight away to cut it out, and it finished pretty sharply, but they still happened, and we cannot overlook them. And sadly, once again, we're having to discuss them because we've been told by fans who were in Derby that the old Sam Haman chant was going again. This was an old favourite from the Vetch. It was, it contains a racist slur against people from the South Asian community. It's not acceptable. It wasn't acceptable back then when it was being widely chanted at the Vetch, and it still isn't acceptable now when it's a small minority trying to resurrect it. Predictable maybe that this is going to be rekindled around in the build-up to Derby Day, but that chant has no place in modern football, and it's important the fans call it out and make those people aware that football isn't going to give them that kind of cloak of invisibility and immunity that they're looking for to get away with racism. And let's face it, if you are, singing a song about a man who hasn't even been involved in football really for the last 15 years, whatever you think of him, like him or hate him for what he did at Cardiff, you can sing a song about him, but when you include the words that are used in that song, then you've crossed the line, and you really aren't welcome in modern day football, unfortunately. We've unfortunately had to discuss that, but we'll move on now to discuss the fans forum, which took place tonight. And Steve, you were there. Give us a little rundown of who was there and what was discussed. Steve, you've just come back from the fans forum with down the Liberty Stadium. Tell us a little bit about it. Who was there, and what were the kind of things that were discussed?
I suppose the best thing to do is to give you a brief overview, really, isn't it? So, Russell Martin, Julian Winter, Mark Allen, amongst others, were on the top table. So, as usual, microphones going around the room, can ask questions. I won't go into all of them because, I have done a live tweet thread on Twitter. So, if anyone does want to read, at Stephen SOS 1987, and you can scroll through there. But we'll pick out some key points. Russell Martin does have something planned for the team talk on Sunday. There's going to be a video recording of some club legends, just talking a little bit about the fixture and what it means to the fans. So that's quite an interesting one. What else have we got? There's a question on the academy in terms of is it aligned with the other age groups and the first team, and the answer is that it is. So that is done to make the transition to the first team quite smooth for anyone that gets an opening in the first team. There's a question on Cooper that was asked by me regarding the fact that he stayed 2 weeks after that they decided he was going. And the whole point of me asking that really was that just to specify that even though I knew it would get battered away and it wouldn't get answered properly, which it wasn't, that I was making the point that I wasn't happy with the situation in the summer, and I felt we didn't deal with it in the way that we should. So, that was said that some of it's confidential, so that he couldn't go into the ins and outs of it. But that was that, really. A little bit about question on fitness. Martin has said that it can sometimes be an easy excuse for a manager, but he said that it is a genuine one. He hated our performance at Bristol City, even though that we won. But he thinks now that we are in a lot better shape, and we've made a big stride forward in the last couple of weeks in terms of fitness. So that's good. What else have we got? A bit about January. The planning for that started. pretty much as soon as the last one's shut. So they've got a few positions in mind. No names were mentioned or anything like that. But the manager really wants young, hungry players. He used Flynn Downs as an example. He had other options, but he really wanted to come here. So that's obviously a good thing. And then Mark Allen did say he thinks it could take 3 to 4 transfer windows to get the squad as we wanted. I wouldn't say that's a major surprise, really, but it does just show you really that this is quite a long job. Bit of a question on Jake Silverstein in terms of he contributed half the loan that went into the club last year, along with Levy and Kaplan, who also put in a half between them. Winter has said he's emotionally and financially invested in the club, so make of that what you will, I suppose. I'm thinking that there could well be an attempted bias from Silverstein at some point. That's just how I'm seeing it, really. And he's been good in terms of dialogue with the trust as well, which has to be a good thing. There's a little bit about gambling in terms of sponsorship, and the club don't really want to go with gambling companies, but they do pay more than others, so it's difficult to make a complete step away, really, from that, but they are trying to and align with more local businesses. For example, obviously we've got Swansea University on the shirt, haven't we, for example? So, I can understand that. What else have we got? In terms of the legal situation with the trust, not a lot was said. Things are moving, not at the pace that people would like, but they are moving along. There will be a statement at some point once there's some more concrete news. Then what have we got? Scrolling through at the moment.
Can I ask you, it might be a good time now to ask you then, Steve, if you were there, you'd have got the vibe in the room.
Yeah, go on.
If I got a conflict in my head between what was actually said regarding the trust and legal action, there seemed to be two stories going on. One saying that this is progressing and it's against the sellers and the buyers, and the other one saying that the relationship's improved and there hopes to be some sort of agreement made. So which one did you think was more likely to occur?
Well, from my point of view, it's a case of legal action was voted for. The trust can't really get out of it now. And the only way that they could get out of it is if all this, whatever it's called, all the people that they're taking action against come to the table with a deal to settle this in some sort of way. But even then, that would have to then go back to a trust members vote. The trust board do not have the power to accept it. So, yeah, I think that's just the sort of the trust way of saying that, they would still prefer to avoid court if possible. And if there's other, if there's a way of settling it, then they're not against sitting around the table and potentially putting another vote back to members if it can be sorted. But like I said, it would have to be, it would have to go back to a vote. So even then, if the trust board make a recommendation that you should accept it, it's not for the members to necessarily vote for that. They can still decide to proceed with legal action. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's going to be quite difficult now to stop this legal action because of the way that the system is in terms of the members having the vote. You could in most cases you could just settle up with the person involved, but it's a little bit more complicated because of the trusts that are involved. Does that answer it?
Yeah, and I think as a passing comment on that, unfortunately, what we've seen over the past few years as well is that there's been very little appetite to move anywhere near the trust's position from the buyers or sellers until the threat of legal action is pushed on them. And I think trying to get them around the table isn't going to work. I think the best hope they've got for getting a resolution outside of court is to proceed with court action, because until they got the fire under their ass, I don't think they want to talk, and until it becomes real. And I think that's what we've seen play out over the last few years. So it's no real surprise that while they're keeping the door open, it doesn't appear to be anything at the other end of it just yet.
Yeah, the funny thing is with it as well that I think that they don't. I think there's a bit of naivety, maybe, just in my opinion, with the people that the action is against, that it will not make court. And like you say, obviously, if it does, which I think it will now personally, because it's got reasonably far as I'm concerned, in terms of securing backing for it, that they will then look to try and settle it. But like I say, it could be too late by then, because the vote is sort of it's with the members, and they could end up in court then whether they want it or not. And even if the trust board don't want it to happen, it's they have to go with what the membership decides. So it's it would have been far better if this had been sorted before, but maybe the previous shareholders thought, they won't get to court, they haven't got the money. But we will see, I suppose. Hopefully we will see in the near future, because it's something that needs to be wrapped up, isn't it?
The other point on that as well, of course, is getting the external investment to allow this to happen has meant that it's actually in someone else's best interest for it to go to court as well. So it's not even as if the old shareholders would be able to sit around and try and to appease the trust board and its members. Someone else has got a vested interest in that. It's going to be very difficult to talk them out.
It's complicated, isn't it? It's it is a minefield, and I do think it'll be very interesting if this does, court action is summoned, and what will happen then will be a bit of a mystery. But I certainly think that there'll be developments once that happens. Anyway, right, moving on. There was a question on sustainability, and Winter did admit that basically we will have to possibly sell players to remain sustainable. That's not a shock in this division. I think most clubs are in that position really, because the finances are so much less than in the Prem. The ticket. This is another question that I asked about tickets going on sale quite late. There was an issue with the Bristol City game. I'm not sure if I mentioned it on here, but my cousin had his ticket on the day of the game, but it didn't come in the morning. He lives in Bridgend, works in Cardiff, so then had to drive back from Cardiff to Bridgend to get his ticket, to then go to the game, and obviously that's not great. So I thought I should make the club aware of that. From what I can gather, it was down to Bristol City really putting them on sales so late. So that's one of those things. But I do think there has been a little bit of an issue with it this time, and with the Cardiff game going on sale late, that was to do with the guidance from the Welsh government. They were waiting for that, so I can understand that as well. But I think it's definitely something that does need to improve, because it does feel like a lot of tickets are going on sale later than normal. I think before, arguably, they were going on sale too early, or often 4 or 5 weeks in advance. But I'd say now, they're going on sale sometimes a week, 10 days in advance. It's not great. I think probably a balance of in between the two would be good from my point of view. This is a juicy one, a bit on Alan Tate. Martin has a lot of respect for him. Tate was very connected with Steve Cooper, and said if he was offered a job with Cooper that he would go. So I think that sort of is why he's gone. Martin did also say that he felt Tate was disappointed he didn't get the manager's job, but obviously he hasn't said that himself publicly. So, that's a bit of a strange one. I was a bit surprised by that revelation, if I'm honest. Winter has said Tate has done a lot for the club, and they sort of agreed together for his development it would be better if he left, but they thoroughly expect him to come back and are looking forward to that in the future. So that's probably something we should discuss, isn't it? I'm not sure if we've discussed the fact that the man, the myth, the legend has moved on yet, but I think those revelations certainly warrant a discussion, don't they?
Yeah, they definitely do. I'm completely surprised that's Alan Tate's position. If that was said in the forum, then there's no reason to doubt it. But I mean, why?
Yeah, I think we all thought Tate wanted the job at some point, but not yet.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's such a. I mean, you would looked at his old teammate Gary Monk and the cauldron of fire he stepped into, and for me, Gary Monk was far better equipped to taking the position at the time than Tate potentially is now. I just feel like certainly in the latter years of Gary Monk's playing career, he was very injury. He was riddled with injuries, wasn't he, towards the end? And decided to do all his coaching badges, and always had that way about him, didn't he? On the pitch, you would have thought this man will be a manager one day. Not really got those vibes from Tate. That's not to say that he won't be a good manager. I just would have expected him to perhaps want to shadow and work on his vision for the game, perhaps a little bit more for a couple more years before wanting to do it. Because, I mean, really speaking, he's probably, if he gets the Swans job in his career, he's only probably going to get it once. And I'm sure it's the one job he wants to make sure he's ready for. I'm a bit surprised about it. I don't know what you think, though.
Yeah, I've never seen Tate as, we've had a lot of players down the years who I've looked at and thought, oh, he's got the potential to, be a really good manager. I've never thought that about Tate, I'll be honest. I was slightly surprised he went into coaching, if I'm being honest. I mean, let's face it, it was only last season, I think, that he was grabbing an opposition player by the throat. If we're being honest, is that the kind of temperament that you want from the man in charge? We love Tate.
On Sunday, that's definitely what I want.
He can do it to all 11 players and the opposition manager. But it's it's funny. It's something we can joke about. If he was in Russell Martin's shoes and doing that, I'm thinking a little bit differently. I'd expect a certain level of maturity that wouldn't see that kind of thing go on. And I don't think the club can be blamed for overlooking Alan Tate as a potential managerial candidate, personally.
Yeah, I'm looking at it a bit differently. I certainly don't think Tate should have got the job at this point. But I mean, if he, excels elsewhere, for example, and then possibly at some point he could end up with the job. But I think Tate has done the right thing for him. And this might not be a bad thing in some ways, for the club. I mean, the fact is the manager has to decide who he wants on the coaching staff, and we all love Tate. But at the end of the day, if there was, if he wanted to go elsewhere, then, that's the way that we have to look at it as well, really. So, I think he'll be back in the future at some point, whether that's as manager, I don't know. But, we'll have to see how he gets on. But I think Tate, I wouldn't rule out him being the manager one day, put it that way.
No, if he goes away to Nottingham Forest and really excels, and who knows, we could see him back here as a manager. But and I definitely don't think we've seen the last of Alan Tate, that's for sure. One thing before we move on to discuss the Cardiff game, quite relevant really, a player who had his impact on several derbies in the past. Wayne Routledge has confirmed his retirement from football, which is not a surprise in any way, shape or form. We discussed a couple of weeks back that now that he'd left the club, that was probably it at his age with his injury. But Matt, now that it's actually confirmed, any extra thoughts from you on the retirement of a Swansea City great?
No, just what you were saying there, actually, that when he said, I've played my last game in a Swansea shirt, it seemed really rather odd wording of saying I'm retiring, and a lot of news outlets picked up on him retiring. And I thought, well, he's actually quite explicitly not said that here. So I did wonder at the time if he was thinking, right, maybe if I get my body back and into fit working order, I want to play at a lower level. And I think maybe him retiring this week confirms to me that was potentially his school of thought at the time, and now maybe he's at a second thought. Well, I'm ready to pack it in. He's settled down here, isn't he? He's very happy in the area, and I can imagine that the club will look after him, and maybe he's not really got a burning desire to put his body through the rigors of getting back to match sharpness, and we obviously wish him all the health and happiness in retirement, and another one who we hope will stay around the club, not for sentimentality reasons, but for every manager who he's worked under has had nothing but good things to say about Wayne Routledge, particularly in his later years. I mean, even Steve Cooper last season and the season before, when he was rarely using Routledge, when he did use him, he was always very, very complimentary of him and saying how important he is behind the scenes, not even if he's not on the pitch. And so for those reasons, and no sentimentality involved at all, I really hope that he's kept involved, because he's clearly a very good influence, and a very someone that the younger players look up to.
Yes, and Steve, even though he was, of course, a former Cardiff player a long time ago, he had a real impact on a couple of derby games over the years, thinking specifically of the 3-0 down to Liberty, where he was one of the scorers. And, of course, the last time we were allowed in to witness a Swans win over Cardiff, the 1-0 under Steve Cooper 2 years ago. He put in the cross, I think, for Ben Wilmot to head home. So what we would give for that kind of game changer on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That goal, as you say, against them in February 2014, I think it was. Now that lovely through ball, wasn't it,
3-0
Pablo Hernandez, and the finish. And I think at that point we hadn't been on a great little spell against Cardiff, so we needed that win quite badly, didn't we? And that set us on the way, as you say, to a great 3-0 win. But I think Routledge deserves a lot of credit. I mean, he didn't break into the team straight away when he first came, but those first, I think that the years under Laudrup particularly were standout ones for him, I would say. Who did really well, didn't he, on the year that we won the cup, for example. There was times where he looked like he might lose his place, but then always seemed to regain it in the later Prem days. I mean, maybe that wasn't always the best thing for us, but I mean, you look back, there's been some great moments in it. Some of them are fairly recently, really. I mean, I look back at that. There was a scuff shot to win at Leeds, but my God, it was an unbelievable moment for everyone who was there. And one of the travesties of the lockdown really was that unbelievable goal against Reading that he scored from with the touch from the goal kick, I think it was, and then the chip the keeper. And then, of course, he's the one that gets the all-important fourth goal at Reading to somehow get us in the playoffs, doesn't he? So, they're standout moments, really. And I'd probably look back on it with Routledge. I think that would have been a great way to sort of sign off, wouldn't it? Because last year he didn't play a great deal, and then sadly he picked up what was, a horrendous injury, really. And at that stage of the career, I think it was always unlikely he wouldn't play again. But a great servant, and I'm sure there may be a role for him somewhere at some point. But I think it's quite interesting with Routledge's career. Then obviously starting at Palace, and then there were a lot of moves, but he couldn't really find a home, could he? But I think no one probably thought when he first came here he'd stay here for 10 years, but that's sort of how it's transpired. And fair play to him. He's done very well for us, hasn't he? And $1.5 million, you got to say, it's proved to be one of our best buys, really, in terms of value for money, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, and a real fantastic contributor over the years to the Swans, a brilliant servant. Who's gone through a real evolution with us as well, from the exciting young winger who joined us about 10 years ago in the Premier League to the senior figure that led us through some tough times in the Championship. All we can say is thank you very much to Wayne Routledge. But without further ado, let's get on to actually discuss what we're all here for. The first South Wales derby of the season. Matt, 12 o'clock on Sunday. Dare I say it? We've said this a lot of times over the years, but I think both teams would prefer if this match was possibly taking place at a different time, looking at their position in the table. The Swans have only won twice so far this season. Cardiff, well, they've lost their last 5. Neither side, it could be said, are really in brilliant form heading into this game, are they?
No, they're not. I think the crumb of comfort, if it was any other game other than the derby, would be to say that Cardiff are heading in one direction and we're heading in very, very different one. Even though it is a process and it's taking time, you can see the Swans are getting better week on week, and we just need to get the finished article now. Cardiff are falling apart, as the old chant does, isn't it? But I think from our perspective, the derby has come now when we are still very, very, very new in transition. We're still quite shaky. We're still far away from the finished article, and we look like this could be outstanding and one of the more memorable ones in the last 10 years, or it could play out as a 0-0 draw. It really could, because both sides are perhaps a little bit shy going forward at the moment. Cardiff are quite porous, but at the same time Swansea aren't clinical. So there's a little bit of that where you're thinking this could play out as a 0-0 draw, which would be quite of an anticlimax as we've been looking forward to it since the fixtures came out. But there is always that. There is always the derby factor, which you've got to take everything you've learned, everything you think you know, and just chuck it away. because it means nothing. You've just mentioned Cardiff lost the last 5 on the bounce. It will mean nothing at 11 o'clock on Sunday when the team sheets come out. That they may as well have won the last 12, because from that moment on, it's a derby game and rules just don't apply for some reason. It's interesting to read what Steve put off the fans forum tonight about the preparations for it, because Russell Martin is sitting in that dodgy ground between wanting to let head rule over heart, but at the same time not wanting to do a Dave Jones and completely disassociate from the derby. So he's got to try and get the players to think logically and not play with complete passion overload, because that can go horribly wrong. But at the same time, he wants them to know that this is more than 3 points, and everyone knows that with derby. So I don't know. He's got his work cut out, because he shouldn't really have to say a great deal before a derby, but it's one the fans will not let them forget about. From hour before kick-off on Sunday, they'll know they're in a derby.
Absolutely. And Steve, let's talk about Cardiff, because they had a decent start to the season results-wise, but I mean, they've had an awful time of things since the last international break. They've lost their last 5, scoring 1, conceding 12. There's some real shockers in there among those 5. They're on the longest losing run in the top 5 divisions. If they lose another one, they'll have lost 6 straight league games for the first time since 1985. Are you surprised that Mick McCarthy is going to be in the dugout this weekend?
Well, first of all, my heart bleeds for that club, obviously. But am I surprised? Well, I suppose they didn't. If you take out the last 5, obviously, which have been quite bad, they didn't start too badly, did they? I think there may have been 3 wins in the first 6, or maybe even 4, something like that. But yeah, I suppose he is under a little bit of pressure. I think obviously what may have helped him was the fact that I think in the last game they were a little bit unlucky, weren't they, to lose? They've sort of lost that one to a smash and grab, and you think if they'd had another especially bad performance, then maybe that would have made the difference. But yeah, obviously losing 5 in a row is going to put you under pressure, and if you were to lose a derby and make that a 6th, the pressure obviously could become untenable. We don't know, do we? I think this is the funny thing with football, isn't it? The fact that some clubs most certainly would have pulled the trigger, I think, on it based on 5 losses in a row. But I mean, every chairman is different, aren't they? I mean, I always remember someone like Steve Keane at Blackburn. The pressure seemed unbearable for about a year, and in the end, I think he quit after they'd been relegated into the Championship. And they're thinking, well, I can't believe why you've done that now, because you've seen out so much, and also it was a case of that you were waiting for Blackburn to pull the trigger for such a long time, and they never did. So it's a funny one with football. Everyone interprets things differently, don't they? And obviously they've decided that they don't want to make a change at this stage. So, I don't think realistically we're complaining about that, but obviously I could be forced to eat my words. You don't know about it, do you? But, I think McCarthy could be on borrowed time, and obviously we could speed that up. And if we do, then I won't be having any sympathy for the man I call Slick Mick.
Matt, who do you think is going to benefit more from the 2-week break that we've just had? Because Cardiff desperately wanted that 2-week break, having, as we said, lost their last 5. They'll probably try to use it to kind of wipe the slate clean and get people back into a positive mindset. But, the Swans, we weren't in the best run of form. We've only lost 2 games so far. We had a couple of injuries, maybe a few players looking tired. We've had 2 weeks to refresh as well, and we've lost fewer players to international call-ups than Cardiff as well. So, who do you think should benefit most then from this 2-week break?
It's an interesting question. It's certainly up for debate. I would probably quite heavily lean in the favour of us, on the basis of this is about for us. It's about fitness, because he wants to play a very high intensity game. Russell Martin, that we didn't play at any point really under Steve Cooper. Whether you're a Cooper fan or not, it was just a lot more of a passive game, and he got great success from it, but it certainly wasn't high intensity. So in that regard, this is a change. So there's that side of it. Just getting them on a training field and getting them doing running drills will be something. But secondly, also it's tactical. It's a tactical overhaul. So he's needed the preseason he hasn't had. Russell Martin, Mick McCarthy had it. It doesn't matter. They're going in a different direction. Mick McCarthy also said a week or two ago that people have sussed out Cardiff. Maybe that's what's gone on. Maybe they've sussed out how we play. That's not what you want to hear from your manager, because that sounds like they've sussed him out. Has he got a plan B? How reinventive is Mick McCarthy? That's not to call him a dinosaur. That's for other people to say if they want to call him that. But how much is he going to reinvent the wheel now at his stage in his career? He, to me, looks like he has one way of playing, and particularly with the personality as at his disposal at Cardiff, I don't think he's suddenly going to be playing tiki-taka football against us on Sunday. I think he's going to keep trying to do what he was doing. I don't doubt that the break might help just to get that last run of form out of their minds and try and hit the reset. And what better way to do that in a derby where all distractions are put away. So yeah, I think both teams will benefit, but on basis of the wording, I think we will benefit more. I feel like Mick McCarthy is flagging, and I don't want that to be famous last words, but he didn't sound like a man who was confident in his own ability. He sounded hopeful that he'd be able to keep his job, which is the sign of a manager who's struggling. Russell Martin's obviously gone a different path, and we're hoping that will come good for us over the next couple of weeks, and what better time to start than now.
Steve, when we're talking about Mick McCarthy, I mean, a couple of weeks back against West Brom, he started 5 centre-backs. I mean, that's, it's almost a joke, isn't it? But he's likely to play something similar again against us. He's definitely going to be playing at least 3 centre-backs, probably 4. The midfield isn't going to be that adventurous, and they're going to be trying to get balls into Kiefer Moore. And they're going to try and make the most out of set pieces and long throws. We kind of know what to expect from Cardiff, don't we? But do you think that we are actually set up to defend against that kind of tactic? Because we haven't played against that kind of team much in the opening stages of this season, and it's going to give us a bit of a new test, isn't it?
I think it is a bit of a concern, if I'm honest. We have not looked as good defensively in some games. So I think it's quite remarkable. We have got 5 or 6 clean sheets in the league, but I think when we concede, it's usually 2 and 3. So that's a bit of a worry, really. I do think we're going to have like a lot of the ball, for example. But as you said, what they're going to do, they're going to look to go long. They're going to play off long throws, set pieces if they get the chance. And that could be a weakness for us. It does concern me a little bit. I won't lie about that. But I think I think what we need to do really is make sure that we move the ball quickly. We use the pace of Ethan Laird, for example. If Obafemi is fit, he's another one that's quick. They won't like players that are looking to run in behind them. They'll want us to play in front of them. So I think that's the way that we sort of need to approach it. And like I said, we need to try not to give them too many dangerous set pieces, because I think that's what they're going to do. They've scored a lot of headed goals, haven't they, Cardiff? So it's pretty clear that that's going to be the threat, and we need to be able to deal with it, even if, because they would be capable in that situation then of nicking a game despite having hardly any of the ball, just because they've managed to stick a horrible ball in the box that we haven't dealt with.
Yeah, Cardiff, all but 2 of their goals this season have been headers, which is an incredible stat, really. They've won more aerial duels than any other team in the division, which, again, is not a surprise when you look at the amount of 6-footers that they've got in the team. For me, their danger man, and the one that we've got to keep an eye on, is Ryan Giles. I thought during the summer that he was a very good signing for Cardiff, did well at Rotherham, very energetic player, has a good left foot on him, can put a ball into a dangerous position. That's the kind of player they need in that team. But they don't have many more players other than Giles who can do that. He's pretty key to the way they play. And I think if we can just keep him under wraps, just keep very tight to him, not give him any kind of space to measure a pass, then I think you go a long way towards stopping Cardiff, at least from open play, where I think only two teams have scored fewer goals from open play than Cardiff this season. So I think he's the danger man, really, because as much as we look at their big men, you need that little guy who's capable of putting in a good pass for them. And I think he's the one player they have who can just float the ball into the box for more to attack, or put the ball into the box when they've got all the big centre backs up there and get the likes of Aidan Flint or Sean Morrison attacking them. And that's how Cardiff are most likely to score. I'd be bitterly disappointed if they opened us up with a flowing passing move, because you wouldn't have thought that they're capable of it, really. They're going to try and bully their way to victory. They're going to play for set pieces and free kicks and build their attacks around that. And because that's how they've played for pretty much the entire season, and going back way beyond that. Matt, who are the key players from our point of view? Who are the ones that you're looking to make the difference? Because Russell Martin's come out this week and said that we've got pretty much a fully fit squad for this match, which is not something he's had too often this season. Point of view to make that difference and get us the win that we desperately want from this game.
I think we can control this game pretty much from the off, really. I don't think Cardiff are, as I mentioned earlier on, I don't think Cardiff are particularly fond of the football in general. I think they just like to kick it in the air and win flick-ons, and that's been my feelings for quite a few years. So to see us set up in a manner which is actually even more extreme ball keeping is probably exactly how this game should play. We've got players in the middle of the park who should be able to pass rings around Cardiff. It is going to be decided, as every football match is, in either penalty area. And I think this is where the question marks remain, because you've got where we struggled perhaps against Mitrovic with Fulham. Cardiff will have Kiefer Moore, who is by no means a Mitrovic, but he is a big centre forward who will give our defenders a hard time. And that's something we're going to have to deal with, especially if we don't put our biggest, bulkiest defender on him. Then that's something we're going to have to overcome. At the other end of the pitch, the 6'5" back line, just happy to sit there and lump everything away all game. That's going to be a difficult thing to get on the end of crosses. So that's something that perhaps we need to adapt from. Maybe look to the likes of Ethan Led to cut inside rather than go around the outside and whip balls in, because I don't think that's going to be particularly fruitful. And if it's Jake Bidwell on the other wing, then so be it, because Jake Bidwell isn't going to cut inside. He is a go down the wing and cross it in 30 times a match kind of player. But maybe he will look to play Ryan Manning out there for this game. Who knows? There are certain players in certain positions, not key personnel, sort of. I think this is going to probably be decided on tactical tweaks rather than the personnel involved. I think if we approach this the right way and try and keep the ball on the floor as much as possible, that's going to harm Cardiff and hopefully keep the ball away from Kiefer Moore's head around the penalty area. That'll be an extra bonus as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that in mind, I'm going to ask you for a prediction. Steve, you go first. Are the Swans going to get the victory in the first South Wales derby of the season?
I'm always reluctant to predict much in derby games because they are so hard to call. So obviously that means I have to sit on the fence. I'm going to say 0-0.
Matt, are you more confident? Do you think that we are going to be able to get those 3 points?
This does have 0-0 all over it. And it does just literally reeks of 0-0. But that said, this isn't like anything. Like I say, you take what you think you know and you throw it out the window. Because if this is 0-0 with an hour gone, unlike Derby, whereby you felt like we could have done more, we could have pushed more, we could have really, really tried to throttle them, but we didn't. This will be different. I don't think the fans will allow anything other than 120%. So with that in mind, I think that the issue is going to be forced. Whether that results in a positive result or not, that's up for debate. However, I think Cardiff will be absolutely delighted to get back on the coaches with a 0-0, and I think we will be bitterly disappointed. So with that in mind, I'm going to put us down for a 1-0 win.
Oof, good stuff. I'm glad that you went for a Swans win, because otherwise we'd have had 3 0-0s, because I'm going 0-0.
It does have it written all over it, but I just think you've got to
it?
disregard what you think you know for this one.
You don't want to say it going into a derby. You want to say, oh, it's going to be an exciting game, we're going to see goals, etc. No, I think, if I'm being honest, I think it's going to be defence against attack. I think Cardiff are going to sit back and defend. They're going to try and soak up pressure. They're going to park the bus and then try to, play for territory, basically, try and win the odd free kick so that they can lump the ball long, play for throw-ins, corners, that kind of game, really, which will enable them to get the centre-backs up and compete for those aerial balls. And I think that's where we are really going to be tested. We're not the tallest of teams. Let's see how we cope with that. But for us, it's about finding that key to unlock a tightly packed defence. And you're looking for something special, like we saw with Piru and Patterson combining against Huddersfield, combining against Fulham, just doing something out of the ordinary. That's what I'd love to see the Swans do. But, this kind of game, I think, especially with the form the two teams have been in, you don't want to concede a goal first. You really want to keep it tight. Last season in this fixture, Cardiff scored within the first few minutes, and we spent the rest of the game trying to knock the door down with no luck, and that's what we want to avoid this time. So I think it's going to be cagey in many ways. I don't think teams are going to be taking too many risks, and I think it's probably going to finish goalless, in my opinion. I just think neither of these teams are winning at the moment, and there's too much riding on this game for both sides for either of them to lose it. So I don't think it's going to be a classic. I think it could be a frustrating one for both teams for different reasons, and I'm going to go for a 0-0 as well. I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'm hoping the Swans can, of course, get the 3 points, give us another Derby Day memory to cherish, but we'll have to wait and see. For everybody that's going down to the Liberty, make some noise, have a few pints beforehand, and make sure that you create the kind of atmosphere that we'd all want on a Derby Day. Do your best, boys, both on and off the pitch. Good luck, the Swans. Until next time, goodbye.